Good evening, I'm Gerg Cahiles sitting in for Pinky Web. Tonight, we ask the questions, we tackle the issues, we clarify matters, and we get on point. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources has issued a 15-day eviction notice for the Blue Star Construction and Development Corporation. This comes after Blue Star reportedly failed to deliver on the agreements it entered into within the Geomasungi Reserve in Rizal. The Masungi Foundation is now asking for Malacañang's intervention through a review of the eviction order and by holding a dialogue among stakeholders. Let's get on point with DENR Assistant Secretary for Legal Affairs and Enforcement, Atty. Norlito Eneran, here in the studio. And later via Zoom, we'll have Masungi Georeserve Foundation's co-founder and managing trustee, Atty. Dumaliang. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Sir George, at isang makakalikasang gabi sa iyo.
Let's start off, sir, by giving us an idea. What happened? Why terminate the agreement with Blue Star?
Okay, before I discuss on this specific contract, let me give you a background as to the contracts involved in these areas. So in 1997, we have this joint venture agreement covering an area of 130 hectares. Then 5 years after, there is an adjacent lot covering an area of 300 hectares. They covered it through a supplemental agreement. That's in 2002. And in 2017, they have this another contract with the DENR, this time with a different entity, the Masungi Reserve Foundation Incorporated. So this is for the entire 2,700 hectares. Okay. Now, the first two contracts pertain to the construction of housing units.
Okay.
For the first contract, the joint venture agreement, the agreement was to build 5,000 housing units, and for the adjacent lot covering 300 hectares, that's for another 5,000 housing units.
So a total of 10,000
housing units. Okay. So these two agreements, or three agreements, were the coverage of the investigation conducted by the DENR. But the investigation on the housing units or housing projects was triggered by a Commission on Audit observation. The Commission on Audit instructed the DENR to conduct an in-depth investigation because there were no accomplishment reports submitted on the housing units.
When was that, sir?
That was in 2014.
Okay.
So the investigation report was submitted in 2016. So, true to the observation of the COA, our investigating team found that indeed there were no accomplishment, and the fact that the 2002 supplemental agreement was not covered by a presidential proclamation.
Okay.
So, yung proseso po natin before a housing project is implemented, dapat may basbas yan sa Office of the President. Unlike in the 1997 joint venture agreement, that contract was, there was a presidential proclamation for housing project. Ang beneficiaries in that housing project were employees of the DENR, DALG, Department of National Defense, Office of the President, and so on and so forth. But in the supplemental agreement, covering 300 hectares, way larger than the first contract, walang presidential proclamation.
Okay.
So, those are the legal issues na niresolve namin, plus violations of the contract. One violation is that, as I mentioned earlier, wala siyang accomplishment, walang natayo ni isang housing unit. Pangalawa is that instead of pursuing the housing unit, iba ang pinursue na activity, and that is the operation of the Geo Park area. So, when they established the Geo Park, may corresponding na fees na sinisingil sa public. So, our government stepped in saying that, wait lang, bakit may ganito tayong paniningil, and ano yung ating naging basihan dun sa paniningil, kasi taliwas na siya dun sa housing project.
Okay.
So, what the DENR is acting on is the fact that itong kontrata na ito na housing project, hindi na siya suitable doon sa existing gamit ng area because ito nga, preservation. So sinasabi namin, okay, hindi na natin ipupursue itong housing project. Then let's go to preservation. Hindi po oppose ang DNR to pursue preservation kasi yun po yung mandato namin.
Okay, that's good that you clarified that, sir. And you mentioned there was a COA observation,
correct,
which resulted to this 2014 investigation conducted by your agency.
That's the report was submitted in 2016. So the COA observation was in 2014. Yes.
So how come, sir, that you managed to see those problems, but you still entered into another agreement, this time with the Masungi Foundation in 2017, when you know for a fact that we're talking about the same area?
Yeah. So isa din yan na tinignan namin na may issue.
Yes.
Because that memorandum of agreement did not pass through the usual process in protected area management. Okay. And one observation in that 2017 memorandum of agreement is that according to the Department of Justice, it is unconstitutional because ang nakalagay na period in that memorandum of agreement is perpetual land trust. So according to the Department of Justice, it runs counter to the provisions of the 1987 Constitution, which provides that for utilization, development, and exploration of natural resources, the contract should be only for a period of 25 years, renewable for another 25 years. Hindi na pwedeng lumagpas beyond that 50 years. So wala po tayong nakikitang any provision in the Constitution that says perpetual land trust. Okay. So I've heard from the interviews of the Masungi Georeserve Foundation Incorporated that they're operating that area for conservation aspect only. But malinaw dun sa 2017 MOA na hindi siya for conservation only. The contract provides for geopark. So kung geopark, geotourism, that's why naniningil sila ng fees from the public, entrance fees. So yun, ang sabi ng ating batas, in particular yung ating National Integrated Protected Area System, kapag may mga ganitong activities, it should be regulated through the Protected Area Management Board.
Assistant Secretary, now with the termination of the 2002 Supplemental Agreement, what will happen to the 1997 and the 2017 agreement?
Okay, they're still subject of our evaluation, and specifically this 2017 MOA, because with due respect or in due deference to the House of Representative investigation, kasi ongoing yung investigation din ng House of Rep, plus the observation of the Department of Justice, ito po ay we're carefully studying our options on these contracts.
Okay. Now, joining us now via Zoom is Masungi Georeserve Foundation's co-founder and managing trustee, Ann Dumaliang. Good evening, Ann.
Good evening. Magandang gabi po.
All right. Now, how are you guys preparing for this scenario on April 2? Yeah, it's about the eviction order. So how are you preparing for that April 2 scenario once the eviction order is in effect?
Magandang gabi. I don't want to anticipate first what our lawyers will be taking as next steps. But we will be sharing those in due time. Rest assured that we are preparing for it appropriately.
Okay, that's good to hear. So now, your reaction first. When you first got a copy of that termination, March 17, what was the reaction of the foundation?
We found that it was unjust and cruel and reckless, to say the least. Unjust because there's a due process when it comes to convening the oversight committees involved for both Blue Star and the Masungi Reserve Foundation. And yet that mechanism was not carried through despite the DNR chairing those committees. There weren't any notices before these around these concerns that they are raising now. In fact, this is the first time that I am hearing about them. There were times in the past administration, not this one, there hasn't been any dialogue with the secretary of this administration. But in the past ones, we were given, and Sir Eneran was there, we were given the chance to air our grievances, but these concerns were not raised with us. And of course, it's reckless in that, what is the plan anyway? No one knows. We all know the current circumstances of this area, wherein it's largely deteriorated. There are looming threats. There are land grabbers even on Lot 10, which I don't think has been given a notice to evacuate or get evicted, no? And so we can see that what's happening really is an erosion of the protection mechanisms that's been put on this landscape, slowly being chipped away at.
Well, Attorney Nor was telling us earlier that they launched an investigation since 2014, and the report was submitted in 2016. And I was asking him earlier, how come that when there's already a report about it, they still entered into an agreement with your organization in 2018. Was that ever discussed during the signing of that memorandum of agreement with your foundation?
No, they weren't discussed. This is, again, the first time that we are hearing about all of these issues. And I'd like to point out, no, there are, of course, protected area mechanisms outlined by the NIPAS law, but even government has also entered into more innovative agreements for co-management for reforestation with local government units when areas have been shown to be neglected despite years of attempts to protect it, which is precisely what we are seeing in the Upper Marikina watershed, and how despite so many memorandums around how prolific land syndicates and land grabs here are, hindi pa rin siya nakikilusan. I remember in one of the interviews, it was mentioned that there are some people who have already been filed cases on. And from my knowledge, it wasn't because of entering into the agreement. It was because of the inability to remove these fraudulent claims and take appropriate action against those claiming the land.
Okay, but now what we are seeing now is that you mentioned that the decision was unjust, cruel, and reckless. And what is your remedy right now? Well, I've read your statement that you're asking for the intervention of the president. Have you tried contacting Malacañang already, or was there any response from their end?
We have not received any response just yet. We're still hopeful to be able to reach the Malacañang. It's been raised to us in meetings that, the Department of Environment and Natural Resource Secretary is essentially the representative or the alter ego of the president. We don't want to believe that this is what the president would want, considering how we've seen inconsistencies and a lot of disinformation in the last 2.5 years over claims around the contract, some of which were echoed again just earlier. And we should be moving forward with these discussions. We should be building on the legacy that was set in the Marcos Sr.'s time, which is actually what started the protection of these areas and beyond in Rizal. And we should take care of the communities downstream who we know are already impacted by the worsening deforestation that is happening in these parts. So we still remain hopeful that the president will intervene. We don't want any more of these misinformation just dragging on, no? It's actually a little bit baffling. This is the first secretary, I guess, the first leadership of DENR that seemed to just not wanted to dialogue. The other secretaries we got to dialogue with, and it was very clear where the disinformation was and where the lack of information was.
All right, so we will ask the Assistant Secretary to respond to Anne's statements earlier, but for the meantime, we'll take a short break with DENR Assistant Secretary for Legal Affairs and Enforcement, Attorney Norlito Eneran, and Masungi Georeserve Foundation's co-founder and managing trustee, Anne Dumaliang. Stay tuned. This is On Point.
para sa pag-uswag kan mga Bicolano, kaipuhan ibalik ang Bicol Express. Kaipuhan na sing tibay, sing rikas ng bullet train gikat sa Japan. Bullet train para sa Bicol, ang programa kan Bicol Saro na mataong kaugmahan sa pamilyang Bicolano. Kafuerting proyekto kan Bicol Saro para sa pinakamarikas na Bicol Express. Bicol to Quezon in just 1 hour.
Bicol to Manila in just 3 hours. Bicol Saro, ang party list na magtataon nin progreso para sa mga Bicolano.
Naniniwala ang PCSO na nasa ating mga kamay ang pag-asang umasenso. Nasa kamay ang pagbibigay ng malasakit. Nasa kamay ang pagbibigay ng ginhawa. Kaya ang mga kamay ng PCSO tuloy-tuloy na tumutulong sa oras man ng kalamidad o pangangailangan. Yan ang panata sa bayan. Yaya sa mamamayan. Dahil ang PCSO di umuurong sa pagtulong.
Welcome back. You're watching On Point. Still with us with DENR Assistant Secretary for Legal Affairs and Enforcement, Atty. Norlito Eneran, and Masungi Georeserve Foundation's co-founder and managing trustee, Ann Dumaliang. Now, Attorney, Ann was talking about the lack of the enforcement of the Oversight Committee mechanism. And she said that the points that you raised in your termination notice were never discussed to the foundation. Your reaction first.
Okay. After the investigation reports were submitted, during the previous administration, Secretary Simato then created a committee, special committee, purposely for the renegotiation. In fact, there was a letter addressed to Masungi Reserve Foundation Incorporated, where we asked politely to them to let's revise, amend the contract because we need to follow the law. And they responded saying that, I brought with me the letter from Mr. Ben Dumaliang, explaining that they cannot amend the contract to comply with the NIPAS because it will entail expenses on their part. Because under the National Integrated Protected Area System, the user's fee is about 5% of the amount of the total land area and plus 1% of the improvement. So yun po yung computation ng user's fee. And it's really a big amount when we compute the whole area of 2,700. So in terms of communicating with them, the DENR did not lack any, opportunity for them to respond to us. So we gave them that opportunity. But unfortunately, despite the efforts made by the DENR, there was no formal agreement. That's why we have to exercise that enforcement function or power of the department provided under the revised Administrative Code of 1987.
Sir, magkano yung pinag-uusapan nating user's fee na dapat bayaran ng foundation?
Well, if it's annual, kung annual yan at 5% plus 1% of the improvement, lumalabas kapag ang i-compute natin is 2,700 hectares, lumalabas ng mga around 4 billion yung fees niyan.
Okay.
So it's a big amount.
Yes,
that's why yun nga may hesitation on their part na pag nagbayad sila ng ganun, baka hindi nila masustain yung operation. So nandun po yan sa sulat ni Mr. Ben Dumaliang sa amin. So we understand that, but we have to move forward.
Yes.
So one by one, iniisa-isa natin yung mga kontrata. Okay? Pinag-aaralan na mabuti. Hindi ito whimsical na ginawa ng DENR because the investigation started in 2016.
Okay.
And then nagkaroon pa ng another investigation in 2019. And ganun pa rin ang findings because we were instructed by COA to take a look at these agreements. We have to remember that housing project, may mga sinusunod tayong accounting procedures, especially if it will entail funding. Okay. So kapag may kakontrata tayo na ibang entity, okay, ina-account yan ng COA. Kapag wala tayong na-present na accomplishment report, magkakaroon ng COA observation, if hindi natin na-explain ng maayos, there will be a COA disallowance.
Yes, that's correct.
Di ba? Kapag hindi natin na-explain ang COA disallowance, magbabayad tayo, mananagot tayo sa COA.
But Attorney, I'm just
Yes.
wondering, is it realistic for a foundation to pay 4 billion pesos to the government for 1 year? And we're talking about several years.
Yes, well, that's the consequence nga because of the much larger area na nakuha ng 2017 MOA. So had that MOA been processed through the procedure set forth by law, hindi nagkakaganito na patong-patong yung kontrata. Okay? Kung nasunod lang yung proseso, nagkaroon ng CSW or yung completed staff work, hindi maisasama yung mga lupa na under contract. We have to remember yung 130 hectares ng joint venture agreement, another 300 hectares. And then yung third one is the 2017 MOA, sinama nila in the 2,700 hectares. And then may mga claims pa in the other areas in that 2,700 hectares. Kaya yun ang sinasabi ni Ms. Ann na may mga claimants. Kasi nga hindi naayos yung CSW, hindi naayos yung investigation, preparation of the MOA before executing it.
Now sir,
Yes.
ano ba ang scenario sa April 2?
Well, Ms. Ann mentioned that they're keeping their options open,
Yes.
may mga legal evaluations silang
Yes.
ginagawa. Kami naman po sa DENR will wait for that period and then we will respond accordingly.
But
And,
if they were able to do it, anong gagawin po ninyo?
depende po sa, kung hindi nila gagawin yon, then we will go to the law, kung ano yung mandato ng DENR, we will proceed accordingly. If it means seeking guidance from the other government agencies, then we will do that to enforce our environmental laws, rules, and regulations.
Well, Anne, the Assistant Secretary was saying that, the foundation should pay at least 4 billion pesos per year. What's your reaction to that? Can you actually pay 4 billion pesos for the use of the 2,700 hectares of land in that area?
That's a ridiculous sum to ask for a reforestation project to pursue and to proceed, no? It simply, what that means is, for the conservation movement, is that it ends up discouraging reforestation projects from existing inside protected areas. And we are clear that the NIPAS law should actually be prioritizing conservation. The interpretation of the NIPAS law should be geared and headed towards that direction, no? So I guess that would be my quick reaction. But at the same time, this is also why we keep on asking DENR to come and see the site once more. Because if they do not, they keep on making these mistakes around which areas fall under which. For instance, the trails fall under the 300-hectare area. That already has a fixed share that is contributed to the DENR. And we have been in discussions with certain levels of DENR from 2011 to 2014, even beyond, on how to remedy all of these things and how to reconcile these things, no? But to simply, and if you look at the reforestation site that is out, part of the Memorandum of Agreement, that is actually for reforestation, no? And other reforestation projects aren't asked to pay for a SAPA.
Okay.
So why? So in fact, for the work that we are doing in this reforestation site, which again is not funded by government, but is funded and shouldered by the organization, dapat i-consider nila yung cost savings nun, no?
Now, Anne, I'm just wondering, you were talking about moving forward earlier. How can we move forward from this problem that we are facing with the DENR? What are the scenarios that you're looking at? Paano ba natin maayos to?
Well, like what we said, we want a dialogue and we haven't had that dialogue, which is why we're requesting for a precedent for a very simple intervention on that level, because it simply has not been opened up to us. Like what you said, we have responded to in writing to DENR on our concerns. I don't think that's where the conversation should have ended, right?
But are you still willing to work with the DENR despite the legal issues that you are facing? Anne?
Are we still willing to work with the DNR? Of course, we are. No? The DNR, for a good number of administration, was still our partner. It's gone to many different DNR secretaries. And we really believe in creating other effective area-based conservation mechanisms. No? There are current ones that are already in place. There's more that we can have so that we can truly work with the governance and the management challenges of different protected areas across the Philippines and make sure that we really move towards a greener, a better forest cover for the country.
Well, Assistant Secretary, now, the project or the Masungi Geopark project was honored with the 2022 UN Sustainable Development Goals Action Campaign Inspire Awards and among other recognitions abroad. Nire-recognize ba ng DNR itong efforts na to na nire-recognize in abroad? Do you recognize that?
Well, we are not saying that the area is not preserved. We acknowledge that there are activities being conducted in the area. Our concern is that we have to legitimize
Yes, correct.
the occupation, the utilization of these natural resources, because the DNR, as well as the other stakeholders in the area, should follow the law. And we cannot ignore this forever. We have to act at some point to make the contracts pursuant to existing laws, rules, and regulations. And our law says that for utilization, development within protected area, it should be through a special agreement in protected areas, SAPA.
Okay.
Okay, and the SAPA provides for certain regulations. And it must be governed by a Protected Area Management Board, and it should comply with the Protected Area Management Plan. Hindi po pwedeng kung ano lang ang gustong gawin ng nandun sa area, pwede nilang gawin. Because dapat nakaayon yan dun sa ating NAIPAS. So yun lang po yung sa amin sa DNR. We do not refute na may mga activities na ginagawa dun sa area which is for the environment, and we were thankful for that. Kami naman po sa DNR, yun naman po yung advocacy namin to partner with different groups, stakeholders that want to conserve, preserve our environment. Yun din po yung aming aim.
That means, Attorney, you're still willing to work with the Masungi Foundation. Ang point nyo lang is kailangan ipasok to sa SAPA.
Ipasok sa existing laws, rules, and regulations. Dapat naayon lahat ng mga kontrata natin sa batas.
Okay, but sir, in case that, hindi mag-proceed itong, we don't want that, no?
Yes.
But we're just creating scenarios here. What's the plan of the DNR? Kapag po, let's say, mangyari itong April 2, walang legal actions from the end of the foundation, what's the plan of the DNR? And how will you protect that massive area na dating binabantayan ng Masungi Foundation?
Well, our plan is to seek intervention as well from our partners, especially the other government agencies, stakeholders, NGOs, a whole of society approach. Kasi ganun naman ang concept ng protected area management. Ba? There is this board composed of different government agencies, different stakeholders, NGOs, the academe, especially yung ating indigenous peoples. Kasi silang nandun sa area. Sila yung nagsasabi na na-deprive kami ng area. May mga reports na ganun. So we have to take into account their plight as well.
But Attorney, hindi mura ang mag-alaga ng isang massive na lugar. Do you have a budget for that?
Of course, of course. At ang atin namang Protected Area Management Board, ayon sa batas, yung income na derive from the utilization of that protected area, they can use 75% of that amount directly dun sa mga projects na gagawin nila. 75% retained income. Pwede yun. Hindi napapasok sa treasury. Diba? So in terms of expenses at yung funding, kayang-kaya yan i-protect.
Okay, last question, Attorney. Yung dialogue ba na hinihingi ni Anne, is it feasible kahit wala nang Malacañang intervention sa bahagi na lamang ng DNR? Are you willing to sit down with Masungi Foundation, talk this over, and discuss? And finally, sabi mo nga, legalize the operations of the organization.
Alam niyo po, ang DENR naman is a government office. Lahat naman po welcome. Welcome lahat. Pumunta sila sa amin, makipag-ugnayan sila sa amin, we will entertain them. Wala naman po nagpipigil sa lahat ng gustong tumulong sa amin. We will welcome that.
All right. Well, we thank our guests for tonight. I know this is an important discussion.
I do have things to add, no? If I may.
Okay, go quickly. You have a few seconds to do your rebuttal. Go ahead, Anne.
I just hope they actually mean that, because we have sent multiple letters to the Office of the Secretary. Not one of those letters have been responded to or playing dialogue. No? And at the same time, if you look at going on the process of the law, I think it was also clear in our agreements how the dispute should be resolved and not a unilateral cancellation, sir. Not to mention yung whole of society approach. We agree po, we all need to be helping each other out. But even in the Project Transform initiative that is being claimed to replace us in the area should we leave, we've not once been invited to those meetings. Even in the protected area hearings that was ran by our senators, they were asked to involve us in those protected area management board meetings that concern Masungi. Still, we weren't invited. So sana si Sir Eneran here stays true to their word that they are willing to dialogue and communicate. And again, when we talk about track record, sir, this is according to the United Nations figures and facts. There's an 80% financing gap. There's less than 100 pesos per hectare. I think marami tayong mga ibang kailangang pagtulungan na lugar, no, as opposed to dismantle.
And I apologize, but we don't have time. I hope we can do this discussion some other time. And that's On Point. Thank you so much to our guest. And join us again tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. here on BNC, the Billionaire News Channel. I'm Gerg Cahiles. Thank you for watching.